Hey everyone! Today we're diving into a really big idea in education, the shift from just knowing facts to, well, to truly understanding. So let's get right into it.
So, let's start with a question that, honestly, gets right to the heart of everything we're talking about today. If you can Google it, why teach it? You know, one teacher of the year famously said something like, "If your students can find the answers to your test on Google, your test sucks." It's a bold statement for sure, but it perfectly frames the massive challenge we're up against. What is the point of school when any fact is just a click away?
And why does this question matter so much? Well, look at the world our students are walking into. They're inheriting these huge, messy, interconnected problems. These are not things you can solve with a memorized list of dates or definitions. They demand a totally different way of thinking.
And that right there is the fundamental problem. Our entire educational system was basically designed for a time when information was rare. You had to go to a library, you had to find a teacher, knowledge was a scarce commodity. That's just not our world anymore, is it? We are drowning in information. The challenge today isn't about getting access to facts, it's about figuring out what to do with them all.
Okay, so if the old way doesn't work, what's the solution? How do we adapt? It's all about adding, well, a whole new dimension to learning, moving way beyond just the facts. Check out this great visual from a pioneer in this field, Dr. Lynn Erickson. On the left, you've got traditional education. It's two-dimensional, it's flat. You've got topics, you've got skills. People often call it a mile wide and an inch deep. The big shift is to what's on the right, adding a third dimension. And that dimension is concepts. This is what takes learning from flat and superficial to deep and powerful. You know, this idea might sound new, but it's actually been bubbling up for decades. It got a huge push back in 1959, right after Sputnik launched. There was this massive panic about falling behind, and thinkers like Jerome Bruner started talking about the structure of knowledge. And that initial idea has been built on and refined for over 60 years, eventually leading to the practical tools we have today.
What Bruner was getting at is just genius, really. He realized that if you get the big picture, the underlying structure of a subject, you don't have to memorize every single little detail. You can figure things out on your own. It's this incredible strategy where you can know a great deal about a lot of things while keeping very little in mind.
Okay, so Bruner had this incredible idea. But who are the people who actually took that big idea and turned it into something teachers can use in the classroom? Let's meet the architects of understanding.
Before we go any further, we have to get on the same page. What exactly is a concept? Well, think of it as a big, organizing idea. It's a mental bucket we use to sort facts. Words like system, change, interdependence, conflict. These aren't just topics, they are timeless, universal, abstract ideas that help our brains make sense of the world.
So there are really three key people who made all this happen. You can think of Dr. Lynn Erickson as the main architect. She designed that foundational 3D blueprint. Then you have Julie Stern and Dr. Rachel French. They're like the master builders. They took Erickson's blueprint and figured out how to actually build it in real classrooms, creating practical tools and strategies that teachers can use every day.
And here's a perfect example of one of those practical tools. It's a super simple but brilliant strategy from Rachel French called is not. Say you want students to really understand the concept of migration. You have them define what it is, but just as important, what it is not. A 2-week vacation is not migration. A daily commute isn't either. But a refugee forced to flee their home? Yes, that is. This simple exercise forces you to draw sharp boundaries around the idea.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But the big question is, does it actually work in the real world? At scale? The answer is a huge, resounding yes.
And for the ultimate proof, you just have to look at the International Baccalaureate, or the IB. It's known all over the world as one of the most rigorous and well-respected educational programs out there. And its entire philosophy, from kindergarten all the way through high school, is built on this foundation of concept-based learning.
And it's not just a buzzword for them. It's literally woven into the DNA of every single level. In the primary years, they use these big, broad themes like how the world works. Then, in the middle years, students use key concepts like change and systems to find connections between, say, science and history. And it all leads up to their famous Theory of Knowledge course, which is basically an entire class dedicated to thinking about the concept of knowledge itself.
And if you need any more proof, here's the smoking gun. Dr. Lynn Erickson herself, the architect of the 3D model, was brought in as a direct consultant when the IB was redesigning its middle years program. she helped build the conceptual backbone of their whole framework. So this isn't some accident, it's by design.
So what's the big payoff here? Why go to all this trouble to rebuild education around concepts? It all comes down to one single incredibly important goal. And that goal is something called learning transfer. I mean, this is basically the holy grail of education. It's the ability for a student to learn something in one situation, say in a math class, and then successfully apply that knowledge to a completely new and unfamiliar problem, maybe in the real world years later. That's the whole point.
This rubric from Julie Stern is fantastic because it actually shows you what that journey from novice to expert looks like. You start out as a novice, maybe your ideas are a little vague or off track, but as you go, you start making better connections until you reach the expert level. And an expert doesn't just know a bunch of facts, they can see the nuanced relationships between big ideas, and they can figure out how to use them in brand new situations.
Dr. Erickson has a great name for this. She calls it synergistic thinking. It's that magic moment when the two levels of your brain, the factual part and the conceptual part, start talking to each other. It's not about facts or concepts. It's about the interplay between them. That's what creates an understanding that is so much more powerful than either one alone. It's the aha moment. It's when the light bulb really clicks on.
So, how does a teacher actually do this? Well, the process is actually pretty straightforward. You start by looking at what you have to teach and pulling out the big core concepts. Then, you make sure students really get what each concept means on its own. And then comes the magic part. You start asking questions about how these concepts connect to each other, and you explore those connections through all sorts of different real-world examples.
Let me give you a really clear example of what this looks like in practice. A traditional history class might have you memorize the dates and key figures of the French Revolution. A concept-based class uses the French Revolution as a case study to understand the timeless relationship between huge concepts like power, rights, and conflict. See the difference? One is about knowing a thing that happened once. The other is about gaining a tool you can use to understand the world forever.
And that brings us right back where we started, full circle, to Jerome Bruner. About 10 years after he wrote his groundbreaking book, he looked back on all the work that had been done and he had a major realization. He saw that just reforming the curriculum, just making better lists of facts for students to learn, it wasn't enough.
He realized that education couldn't just be about abstract structures. It had to be about rolling up our sleeves and tackling the real, messy problems facing the world. In his words, we need to put vocation and intention back into the process of education. It's not just about knowing things. It's about having the purpose, the intention, to use that knowledge to make a difference.
And so that leaves all of us with a really big question to think about. In a world that is getting more complex every single day, how do we create learning experiences that actually matter? How do we stop preparing students just for the next test and start preparing them for the world? That, right there, is the whole point of the shift to deeper learning.